Welcome in the Vikings Now. I am your host for today's show, Patrick Siepman. We're going to be talking about the top Vikings free agent targets left. It's been a crazy start to free agency so far. Vikings have signed names like Marcus Davenport, Byron Murphy. They have been making moves and more moves than I expected, but I don't think they're done. I do think the Vikings do have more moves to make, and I think they will be aggressive here, and I think there's a couple names that I'll be pointing out on today's show that I do want the Minnesota Vikings to sign. But before we get into it, who is your top Vikings free agent target left? Is it a name such as a Bobby Wagner? Or is it a name like an OBJ, Leonard Floyd, Yannick Ngakoue, whoever it may be? Just let me know down in the chat right now. Who is your top Vikings free agent target remaining? So let's go here. We're just going to go. I got 17 names that I think are likely for the Vikings to sign. Starting off with the big four right here, Leonard Floyd, OBJ, Bobby Wagner, and former Viking, Yannick Ngakoue. Funny how that trade just did not work out at all. But I think these are the top four kind of unanimous free agents left that the Vikings could sign. But I do want to kind of zero in on one of these guys. And that's OBJ. Let's talk about OBJ because the Vikings, according to Vegas and a lot of other bookmakers out there, the Vikings' odds to land OBJ have skyrocketed over the past couple of days. And a lot of that had to do with the Cowboys going out and trading for Brandon Cooks. Because a lot of people thought OBJ was heading to Dallas. Now could he come back to Minnesota, reunite with his former offensive coordinator, Kevin O'Connell, team back up with his buddy in Justin Jefferson? I don't know, but let's talk about it. OBJ, past 4 seasons. He did not play in 2022, obviously with that torn ACL. In 2021, he had 14 games played. That was when he went out and won the Super Bowl with the Los Angeles Rams, and he had a solid year there. But again, he has not passed 1,000 yards since that 2019 season. I do think OBJ still has some left in the tank, but again, he's coming off his second ACL surgery. We just can't ignore that fact. I think he would be a great wide receiver too. I think he still has just a little bit left in the tank, but can he do it for a full 18 games? I am not sure. Let's check out the Vikings wide receiver depth chart here in a second. EJE, I see you in the chat. Justin Jefferson, the wide receiver 1, obviously. I think he's going to be there hopefully his whole career. Hopefully get him locked up this offseason. But, man, if you could put Odell as that wide receiver 2, that would really, really excite me. Odell Beckham Jr. as a wide receiver 2 for the Minnesota Vikings, I think that would be dynamic. You pair him up with a guy like TJ Hawkinson, KJ Osborne. Obviously, we just signed Brandon Powell, who would be joining the depth chart here in a second. I think that would be great. KJ, OBJ, and Justin Jefferson. That would be an elite big 3 next to Josh Oliver and TJ Hawkinson. But I do want to ask you guys this. Would you sign OBJ? You're Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. You got the Vikings payroll. OBJ sitting in your office. Would you offer him a deal? Type OBJ if you would, and type no BJ if you would not. Let me know down below. I'm assuming I'll see a lot of OBJs in the chat here in a second, but I'm going to see. I'll see. I'll wait to see. Let me know. Would you sign OBJ? Some of the other best free agents left here. Jarvis Landry from the New Orleans Saints, DJ Chark from the Detroit Lions, Rock Ya-Sin, cornerback from the Las Vegas Raiders last year, and edge, Frank Clark. And now one of these guys I do want to focus in here in a second is Jarvis Landry. But I will say DJ Chark, if he would be kind of my top other wide receiver besides OBJ here, but I think he's going to be too expensive for the Vikings. Then obviously Rock Ya-Sin. I'm a big fan of Rock Ya-Sin. I think he'd be a great corner addition. I don't know if the Vikings would put more money into that group considering how loaded this year's draft class is. Frank Clark, I would love him. He's a great postseason player. Doesn't really do the best in the regular season, but with the Vikings getting Davenport and for some reason Zadarius Smith is still on this roster, and with Danielle Hunter, I just don't really think edge is that big of a need. But I maybe have a shocking take for you guys. I want them to sign Jarvis Landry ASAP. Let's just say we are going to hold on and not bring in a legit wide receiver too. I think Jarvis Landry would be a great option next to a guy like a Justin Jefferson. And I'll kind of explain my thoughts more here in a second. But last 4 seasons for Jarvis, yes, obviously this past year, I think a lot of people think he is cooked. I think a lot of people don't think Jarvis has anything left in the tank. if you just ignore that 2022 season, he has still been productive. Yes, those numbers are going down, but I still think Jarvis, if you put him around the right guys, put him in the right system, I think this can work. And I do think with the Minnesota Vikings, hear me out, with their current situation and how good Justin Jefferson is, I don't think the Vikings need a true wide receiver too. Like, I really don't. I know a lot of people want to be like, oh, go get D-Hop next to Jefferson. Go get T. Higgins. I love this. But I was on the phone with my dad, and we were walking home last night. I was talking about McCole Hardman, and if, like, we should bring in McCole Hardman, and then he kind of brought up the point, well, Vikings still need a true wide receiver too, and I kind of countered that point with, but if how good Justin Jefferson is, if you put just a bunch of solid pieces like KJ Osborne and TJ Hawkinson, and you add a guy like Jarvis Landry, who could be a great third down guy, I think Jarvis would be a great addition to this team. And I'm not saying he's a great player in September, October, even November. But January and February, in the playoffs, when it's key third downs, you just give Kirk Cousins just another guy to go to on those key, gotta have it third downs. Jarvis is still that guy. Jarvis still has just a little bit left in the tank. I would be all in on bringing in Jarvis Landry as a possible wide receiver 2-3 hybrid with KJ Osborne. Then you still have guys like Jalen Naylor stepping up. I think Jarvis Landry, he would be a signing a lot of us would raise our eyebrows at. But then when it's January, February, and he's having these huge playoff games, huge third downs, keep your mind out. Keep your mind open, I should say, for Jarvis. Now, guys, if you love talking Vikes, if you bleed purple, just like I bleed purple, hit that subscribe button. I am almost closing in on 15,000 subs, which is our race that we have with our Saints channel here at Chat Sports. First channel to get 15,000 subs is our winner. Me and my friend Trace here, we are still figuring out the logistics of everything. But, hey, if you guys want to help me out, it's free. We'll keep you posted with all Minnesota Vikings content all year long. Just go down there and hit that sub button. Moving on, the next kind of batch of free agents here is Marcus Peters, Miles Jack, Bud Dupree, and Poona Ford. I love Poona Ford. We'll kind of zero on him in a second here. But Marcus Peters, this was a guy I really wanted during the middle of last season. I don't know. I just feel like Marcus Peters, his antics and everything just, I don't know. He just doesn't excite me as much as he used to. And then obviously like a guy like Miles Jack, he's a great linebacker. I just would rather see the Vikings go another area at the linebacker position. I want Brian Asamoah to be that guy. Kind of the same reasoning I had for Frank Clark. Bud Dupree, he's a great player. But again, I just don't really think Bud Dupree would kind of be filling a need the Vikings have. But give me Poona Ford. Poona Ford is the big old dude from the Seattle Seahawks. And I was talking to Tom Downey earlier, and I was saying, God, I miss guys like Patrick Williams and Kevin Williams from the old Minnesota Vikings days. And that's Poona Ford. He is that dude in the middle who can just muck it up for the Minnesota Vikings. And if we're taking a look here at the Vikings depth chart right now on just the defensive line, obviously we signed a guy like Dean Lowry, which is a big pickup from the Green Bay Packers. But I do think Poona Ford would fit in very nicely here for the Vikes. I just think you just need more defensive line depth. You need another guy next to Harrison Phillips and Dean Lowry. So I would be all in on getting them. Again, I don't know if it's likely. I think Poona Ford might be demanding a little too much money that the Vikings are willing to spend. But again, Poona Ford, I would be all in. Now let's talk about Marcus Peters here for a second, because the Vikings obviously need cornerback help, and we really don't have any veterans at the cornerback position anymore with Patrick Peterson leaving and a lot of the, I guess not additions, subtractions from the Vikings defense this past year. I would be a fan of Marcus Peters. It would have to come down to the contract. I think it would maybe be a one-year vet min type of deal, but he plays with swagger, plays with confidence. He's that typical in-your-face man-to-man corner that I think Brian Flores would love to have. I think he would be a good mentor for guys like Andrew Booth and Caleb Evans in that cornerback room. Marcus Peters, I would love to sign him, but again, it would come down to that contract for us and for the Vikes if I would want to bring a guy like Marcus Peters in. Would I be excited if I got that notification? Of course. He's a good football player, and the Vikings need more just good football players on that side of the football. Now we're talking about the last batch of free agents left. Ezekiel Elliott, Vikings aren't going to get him. He's a more cooked version of Dalvin Cook. Taylor Lewan, tackle from the Tennessee Titans. If you talk about cooked, I think he fits under that description. Isaiah Wynn and Jadeveon Clowney are two guys that I'll kind of talk about here. I know a lot of Vikings fans have been kind of throwing out Clowney, and he kind of gets thrown out every single year. But I do want to kind of mention this to you guys about Clowney. Apparently, he was complaining to a lot of the Browns defensive coaches about them giving Myles Garrett favorable matchups and saying they were inflating his numbers. And I'm like, well, that's what you're supposed to do for your best player. Like, you're supposed to get your best player the best matchup possible and have him be the one that game wrecks the game, especially from the edge side of the football. I just don't really think Clowney's a big of a team guy anymore. I mean, I feel like every year we kind of had this conversation, who's going to sign Jadeveon Clowney? And then he really just doesn't really make that impact. I'm kind of out on Clowney. I don't think the Vikings should even look at him. I don't think they are going to look at him after the Marcus Davenport signing. Get Clowney out of there. But one guy I do want to kind of touch on here, Isaiah Wynn. Isaiah Wynn, I think, would be a great option. I think it would be a great backup swing tackle next to Oliuta, who's our swing tackle probably right now. But if Brian O'Neill, again, knock on wood, Brian O'Neill, Christian Darrisaw were to have to go down for some reason, again, I would not be too upset with bringing in Isaiah Wynn. I think he's got great experience in the NFL. I think he's a great, solid tackle option. Isaiah Wynn, he would be a great kind of swing tackle backup that the Vikings could potentially bring in.